Changing a country isn't easy, but change is inevitable, and the choices we make today will shape our country for generations to come. That's why the Australia Institute is publishing our first book as part of our 30th anniversary celebrations. What's the Big Idea offers 32 ideas for a better Australia from leading thinkers such as Yanis Varoufakis, Auntie Pat Anderson, and Professor Peter Doherty. The essays are a roadmap and a reminder that the solutions exist. Australia just needs the courage to implement them. Visit australiainstitute.org.au or follow the link in the show notes to pre-order your copy of What's the Big Idea today.
Hello and welcome to Dollars and Cents, the Australia Institute podcast where we're talking about just what the hell is going on in the economy. I'm Elinor Johnston-Leake, the senior content producer here at the Australia Institute, and as always, I'm talking to our chief economist, Greg Jericho. Hello, Greg.
Hi, Elinor.
How's it going today?
Good, really good.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah.
Great to hear. So we mentioned a few episodes, Greg, that we were going to dig a bit deeper into what a Trump economy is going to look like, and I think today is that day. We're going to have a look at what his economic policies might mean for America and the world. And the biggest talking point of Trump's economic policy has been tariffs. It's kind of the buzzword at the moment.
But we begin tonight with a word you all need to get real familiar with. Tariffs.
President-elect Trump has just announced that starting on day one of his administration,
I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States.
that could raise costs for Americans on everything coming across either border. We're talking about cars, electronics, oil, wood, food, avocados, maple syrup.
Tonight, Mexico says it will slap a tariff on U.S. goods at exchange. Trump pointing to the border, fentanyl, and illegal immigration. But tonight, this question here, who pays for these tariffs?
He's proposed 10 to 20% tax on all overseas imports and 60% on goods from China. Greg, it's been framed by Trump and his supporters as making China pay, which, as we'll get to, isn't how it works. But to start off with, Greg, what are tariffs?
Well, Elinor, tariffs are basically just a tax. But they're just a tax on goods that are imported. So let's say you're buying a car from Japan. I'm a car dealer who's selling cars and I'm buying them from Japan and they cost $20,000. So I pay $20,000 to Mr. Toyota and I get a car. Now, if a tariff comes in, let's say a 10% tariff, well, I have to pay $20,000 to Mr. Toyota and $2,000 to the government as a tax, in effect, the tariff. And so what that means is now it costs me $22,000 to buy that car.
Yeah.
And so as a result, am I going to still sell it at the same price? No, I'm going to increase the price. So basically what a tariff is a bit like the GST, where it's a tax on everything. And as a result, consumers, when we buy things, we have to pay that 10% more. Tariffs are just essentially a GST, but only on imports.
So China isn't going to pay, and in the end, the American people will.
Yeah, the key word is it's an import tax, and so it's only paid by the people who are importing the stuff, the goods. So it only gets paid once it reaches the border of, in this case, the USA, and you have to pay the tax to get the good in. Now, that's getting paid by the person who is buying it, not by the person who is selling it. So it's all going to be paid for by Americans, by American consumers, because let's say you're running Walmart or Kmart or these stores and you're getting stuff from China, you're not going to say, oh, well, I got to pay that extra tax. I'm not going to pass that on to consumers.
Yeah,
no, you
not
raise
likely.
prices. Yeah, and so one of the other things, much like the GST, tariffs are regressive because they hit people on lower middle incomes more than they hit people on higher incomes, because lower middle income people spend more of their income on goods.
Yep.
And especially we know even sort of we look at the type of goods that are often imported, especially at stores that may be kind of your more sort of bargain kind of stores,
Yeah.
especially things like clothes and things like that. which is-
Relying on cheap labor overseas.
yeah. And so that's going to hurt them more. And that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt China or Canada and Mexico. And the big news that's come out this week is that he's going to put 25% tariffs on stuff coming from China and Mexico. Doesn't mean it
Canada and
doesn't.
Mexico.
Canada and Mexico. That doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. That doesn't mean that Canada and Mexico are going to pay it, but Canada and Mexico, especially the companies, will hurt from it.
Yeah. And this all seems a bit bonkers. I mean, you know, it is Trump, so it's, I suppose, somewhat expected. But, I mean, is he actually going to do this? I mean, why Canada? You know, they're so nice.
Well, this is even more bizarre because, he's announced this 25% tariff on everything imported from Canada and Mexico. Now, America imports a lot of stuff from Canada and Mexico because they're on the border. They get a lot of stuff. Cars are a big item they get from Canada and Mexico, and also oil and petrol and gas. And that is why this is even more bonkers, because you can understand perhaps putting a tariff on a final good, as in something that you get from somewhere else and you're just buying it from somewhere else, and that's all it is, and instead of buying something that was made here in Australia. But what a lot of American companies do is they import stuff from Mexico and Canada and China and other places to use to make stuff that they then sell. And so you're actually raising the cost of making stuff in America as well, especially when you raise the cost of oil and gas. So it's a bizarre thing. Also bizarre because he says he's doing it because of fentanyl.
Can you explain that to me?
Well, look, China is a main source of fentanyl. A lot of fentanyl is produced in China, and a lot of it gets to America via Mexico and Canada because they're the land borders, so it makes it easier. And so Trump, in his deranged mind, is essentially saying, I'm going to put these tariffs on you unless you do something about fentanyl. And China and Canada and Mexico are going, what?
Yeah.
You think
That's not the government's importing.
You think we're in charge of the fentanyl produce here? And also, what do you want us to do? What measure exactly could we do? And, you think in China, they actually had been doing some international cooperation with crime agencies to help try and stem the production of fentanyl and all this. China kind of got the shits with America a bit in the last 4 years when America sort of ramped up its talk about Taiwan. They said, well, stuff here, we won't do that anymore.
Yep.
So they might just bring that back, but it's like, is that good enough? It's one of these things with Trump. He views everything as in terms of leverage. What can he do to get something out of it? So what everyone's trying to work out is he actually going to bring in these tariffs, or is he just saying, if you don't give me X or Y, I'll bring them in? And maybe the other countries don't even actually have to do anything. They just have to announce they're going to do something. Trump will do a big, look at me, I achieved this great victory.
Yeah, I beat them.
Yeah. They're paying for it, and woohoo, and now he doesn't go through, and that might be the case. Because what we're already seeing, the Mexican president has always come out and said, hey, we can levy tariffs as well, and we'll levy tariffs on American imports. And here's the thing, Canada and Mexico are the two biggest export destinations of American goods.
Oh, really? I suppose that makes sense. Yeah.
So if imports do hurt the other countries because the price of their goods is now more expensive. Like if America put a tariff on Canadian goods and you're an importer in America, you might go, well, I'm not going to pay that 25% extra. I'll get my car from Germany or from China or somewhere else that doesn't have the tariff. And so if you're a Canadian company, you're going, oh, great, my product is now more expensive. And so it hurts business that way. So the same way, if Mexico says, right, we're putting on a tariff on American goods, that's going to hurt American companies. And China will do the same. We know Europe is really gearing up if Trump decides to put tariffs on EU stuff. And here's the really interesting thing. governments aren't stupid, and they're probably a little bit smarter than Trump, actually.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Because Trump will go, I'll do a ban on, a tariff on everything, and that hurts American consumers.
Yeah.
European countries don't want to hurt all consumers, and they don't want to make everything more expensive. So what they did when Trump last brought in some tariffs against them, they were like, right, we're going to put in some tariffs on things like Harley Davidson motorcycles. We're going to whack a big tariff on those. On Levi jeans, we're going to put a big
most
tariff.
American goods.
We're going to really look at what they call sort of the pinch points. What can we do to make you hurt in areas where it's going to hurt you politically, and which we've got plenty of competitors here who can produce jeans, who produce motorcycles, and we can get motorcycles from elsewhere, but we're going to make it hard. We're going to make you hurt in ways that aren't actually going to hurt our consumers all too much. And so that's what we might see a lot of. So, but overall, it's terrible if a trade war breaks out, because in a sense, all that happens is everything just becomes more expensive. Everyone has less, can buy less with their money, so everyone's living standards are worse off, and nothing good for the economies, really. Like even if you think, oh well, they've put all these tariffs on manufactured goods and everything, so they'll create all these manufacturing jobs in America. No, probably they'll just come from other. There might be an increase in manufacturing jobs, but they'll just be jobs that were in other industries that are now getting hurt by tariffs elsewhere. And so it's just sort of a bit of a moving around of stuff.
It also seems like there's a hard limit on the amount of, things that you can actually produce in America.
Yeah, and especially when you've got Donald Trump saying, I'm going to deport a whole stack of undocumented migrants who are a not insignificant size of the workforce in things like construction and manufacturing
and I imagine
agriculture.
the lowest paid.
And so that's going to raise wages. Prices are already going up. This can cause inflation. It means interest rates in America rise, which means it's more expensive to kind of do business in America because you have to borrow at higher rates. And so it's not like a company's going, I'm in China, I've got tariffs on me, I'll move my factory back to America. It's like, well, one, America makes up about 14% of all exports out of China. So China can go, well, there's a lot of the rest of the world that loves our products. We'll just go elsewhere. And also the cost of doing that is such. So it's not like the factories are all going to come back. All it's just going to do is hurt a lot of people because we got this one guy who thinks I'm making China pay.
Yeah. Well, I guess let's hope for everyone's sake that he is bluffing.
Yes.
And so in the news back at home, we've got a stalemate between the Greens and Labor broken.
No longer open to negotiation, Labor's hard line on housing paid off late today.
The Greens will vote for Labor's key housing policies after a lengthy standoff.
This afternoon, when the Greens waved through both your bills, were you surprised?
I was a bit surprised. It is a big about face in the Greens strategy here.
We tried hard to get Labor to act on negative gearing and soaring rent increases, but we couldn't get there this time.
For 2.5 years, everything that our government has tried to do on housing, the Greens have worked with Peter Dutton to block and delay.
After accepting that Labor doesn't care enough about renters to do anything meaningful for them.
The coalition is vowing to repeal the bill, which was an election promise in 2022.
The help to buy and build to rent bills have both been waved through by the Greens. They, I suppose, gave in. So, Greg, can I finally do it? Can I afford a house? Is this going to be the end to all my problems?
No. Well, look, maybe. I mean, I'm not going to make any assumptions about how much you earn. But
yeah.
Look, let's give some context of this. Yeah, the Greens did back down, and I think purely they backed down because they couldn't explain really to anyone why they were blocking these things, which aren't the help to buy and build to rent policies in themselves aren't terrible. They just don't do much.
Yeah.
And they're not going to solve anything. And the Greens' initial policy was how we won't vote for this until you actually do something decent. And, that's fine. But in the end, it comes down to you blocking something that isn't hurting anybody, might do a very smidgen, tiny little bit of good. Why are you holding this up? Just pass this through and keep pushing for more.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what it came down to. And the smart thing by the government was they did all the heavy lifting in the name of the legislation.
Yeah, is it pretty much just exactly what they sound like? You just give a brief overview.
The Help to Buy scheme is probably the easiest. It's available to people who earn less than $90,000 if you're a single and $120,000 if you're in a couple. So essentially low middle income we'll call, not so much low income, middle income people. And it's designed in a way that the government will take a stake in the house, 30 to 40% of the house that you repay back over your time. And the reason why they do that, it means you only have to have saved up 2% of the deposit.
Yeah.
Rather than say 20% or 15% or whatever the bank is suggesting you need, because you don't have any assets, you don't have a home that you can loan against already. And that's great.
Sounds pretty good.
It sounds nice. The problem is it's capped at 40,000 properties over 4 years.
Oh,
so
not many.
10,000 a year. So the government has been big about saying, if you earn less than 90,000, saying, it's how 70% of people are eligible for this, making it sound like 70% of people can access this, and it's like, well, it's kind of first 10,000 in.
Yeah.
And to give a bit of a context of it, we probably buy and sell about 600,000 properties a year. So not really going to make any difference. And also the problem is working out, okay, how many of these 10,000 people were going to buy the house anyway?
Yeah.
Or the property anyway, because they probably could have done a deal with the bank where they could, because banks do offer small deposits, they might have now to get assistance from a parent or something. And it's like, is it actually increase? Are there 10,000 people who wouldn't have been able to get a home now able to get a home? And even in the best case, it's still, that's 10,000 people. So it's not going to do any harm, not going to fix much else. The build to rent, I'm not even going to get into it. It is really complicated. Okay. Basically trying to encourage commercial investors to build apartment blocks of 50 or more. And again, it's a case through tax breaks. And again, it's a case were these guys going to do it anyway because there was a good commercial return?
Yep.
And we're just giving them a tax break anyway. Is it actually solving anything? Don't know. But it's been passed purely because, I think the Greens couldn't really explain why they were blocking a thing called Help to Buy.
Yeah,
that sounds nice.
Yeah, it doesn't sound great.
And I think that's pretty much what it came down to.
Yeah. Well, what might then hopefully help me buy a house? Also in the news this week, the federal government has told the Future Fund to invest in housing and green energy, where, and I'm guessing this is key, it is profitable, in quotes there. Greg, can you just remind us what the Future Fund is? And is this the thing that's going to help me buy a house?
Look, the Future Fund.
You don't need to laugh at that.
The Future Fund is, okay, there's a couple sort of versions of what it is. One, again, doing a lot of heavy lifting with the name. Future Fund sounds wonderful. Sounds like we're all going to get a nice little benefit from this fund in the future. It was set up for two reasons. The notional reason that Peter Costello said he was setting it up for was to help pay the superannuation benefits of public servants, especially boomers, who back before sort of the turn of this century had access to some pretty swish superannuation deals, a lot of defined benefit schemes where it was actually advantageous for you to retire when you were 54 years old and 11 months.
Gosh,
that's
because so young.
your actual super would, you were better off doing it. It was called the 5411 scheme amongst public servants. I joined the public service far too late to be able to access any of that. So there was a lot of super, all these boomers retiring and everything, and there was a sense of, oh God, we got all this money we're going to have to pay. We better have a fund. We'll use all the mining boom revenue, or some of it, $60 billion in the instance. We'll set up this fund. That fund will invest and the returns will build up and we'll be able to pay all these things. that was the notional thing. The real reason was Peter Costello didn't want John Howard of the National Party spending all of the mining tax revenue. And so he basically tried to lock it away from them. And, that worked because he knew that with there being so much economic growth in the economy that if John Howard saw all this revenue and just spent it, inflation would have gone really mad, and it still did go pretty mad. So that's what it was for. In reality, we've already got enough in the future fund to be able to pay back those superannuation sort of liabilities. That's not really a concern at all. It never really was. It was always just a bit of a line. But now it's this thing. It's kind of a little bit like the sovereign wealth fund that invests in things to get a return. The government notionally gets that return, the returns on the investment into the budget each year. The whole thing builds up, and the government won't actually touch the capital, sort of the base amount of the future fund until midway through next decade. So it's kind of just there earning money, and what the government is saying, well, if you're out there investing, you've got all this money to invest, maybe invest in some things that will be good for the economy, good for society, rather than just caring about making a return. And this has caused quite a bit of kerfuffle.
At the Future Fund?
Not so much at the Future Fund, but by people like Peter Costello, who views the Future Fund as his personal baby, probably because he set it up, and then Kevin Rudd, in a moment of complete idiocy, appointed him to be in charge of the Future Fund after Peter Costello retired. And Peter Costello's like, oh, how dare you, the government, interfere, which is complete bull, because the government has interfered many times in the past, and the Future Fund does have quite a number of things that it will not invest in, such as tobacco. It doesn't invest in tobacco. And that decision was made, I think, back in around 2010. Just last year, due to the Liberal Party, who are now getting all uppity about the government suggesting that how dare you say they should invest in renewables, got really up in arms about the Future Fund shouldn't be investing in Chinese companies that could be linked with, sort of, are they really connected to the Chinese government, and are they sort of detrimental to our interests, national interests, and why are we propping them up by investing in them and things like that. There's a whole range of companies that they've sort of kind of got on their blacklist that they won't invest in. They do seem very happy to invest in arms and defense contracts and things like that.
Yep.
So this is just a case of saying, hey, you're no longer investing in tobacco because we think tobacco is not a good product. Maybe investing in things that are good, such as housing and renewable energy, is good. And actually, it's still going to bring a return, but it'll also help provide an amount of capital.
Seems pretty.
It is, and
harmless.
Yeah, but you've got conservatives all up in arms going, "Oh, now it's become the government's honeypot or slush fund." They're going to, and it's like they're not raiding it.
Yeah.
The Albanese government itself put off, extended the years in which they could actually access the capital for another 5-10 years. And so they're not accessing, they're not raiding it. They're just saying, hey, how about you invest in these areas because that would be good for our economy in the long term. And they still have to get a good return. And let's be honest, housing is a pretty good bet in Australia. It's it's not a.
It's in high demand.
Yeah, and so it's all a bit. Yeah, it's a bit of a kerfuffle about nothing, just because they want. The Liberal Party like to view the Future Fund as their great success and shows that they are better economic managers, and so they get really uppity about it because they don't have anything else like Medicare or anything to defend. So this fund really, which Australians don't get really any benefit from it. I mean, to be honest, and this is one of the things we at the Australian Institute have really taken issue with is this creation of funds like the Housing Australia Future Fund and the Health Fund and Education Funds. It's like if the government actually thinks housing is a good investment
invest in housing.
Invest in housing.
Yeah.
Don't create a fund that invests in something and then we use the returns on those things to then invest in housing. It's like, why have we got all these stupid steps in place? Things like the Future Fund are just really good for, let's be honest, investment pros who get nice returns. They do get paid well. I'm not a big Future Fund fan. But I certainly think if we've got them, we might as well use it for things that are good rather than just thinking, it's all about, trusting the future fund investors to know what's best. It's like, no, it's Australia's money. Let's, direct it where we should.
Benefit Australia. And just one last question. So will I be able to afford a house with the future fund investing in housing?
Not this year.
Okay. Well, I'll ask you again next year.
Yep.
Which is coming up.
Yeah. And we're coming right to the end. A lot of things about to happen in the next few weeks on the economic front. And we will be all over them before we all head off to Christmas and bid adieu to the glorious 2024.
Glorious?
Well,
we'll see how.
Yeah, it was.
There's still some weeks to go.
It was a struggle, I know.
All right. Well, I look forward to learning about all the ways that 2024 is going to be extra memorable over the next few weeks.
Thank you, Elinor. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And we will be back with another Dollars and Cents episode next week. And I can tell you, next week, that wonderful acronym again, GDP is back. We will get the September quarter GDP figures. There has been already a few sort of murmurings about it. The Liberal Party have discovered the economy is not doing all that well and they're seeking to blame the government and conveniently forgetting the interest rates went up 13 times and maybe that had something to do with it. So we'll be across all what's going on in the economy, how we're going, how are living standards going, what industries are doing well, and basically how households are struggling mightily. We'll be doing all that next week. This episode, though, of Dollars and Cents was recorded on the 27th of November, and some things may have changed except for Elinor's ability to buy a house.
This is a great running joke we've got.
Yeah. It's very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially for me.
Yes. Chuckles all around. My column on the tariffs, the impact of the Trump tariffs, and also just a bit of a look at the history of tariffs in Australia and what happened, for example, when we dropped the tariff on cars. You can find that all on my column, Grogonomics, which is at the Guardian Australia site. And for more research on all things to do with economics, society, the climate, and everything in between, you can find on our website, which is at australiainstitute.org.au. My Blue Sky handle and the handle I use at other social media is at GrogScammer, and I also like to just put out a note saying thank you to everyone who's been leaving replies on questions that we can ask in our last episode of the year. Really good feedback, and please keep them coming. Elinor's handle on Blue Sky is Elinor Johnston Leake.
Yep. No hyphen.
No hyphen, because that would be one character too many.
Exactly. Yep.
Please engage with Elinor. She loves to chat. No, she doesn't. She just retweets
Blue Sky
stuff.
It's a bit better than Twitter, you know.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Fewer Nazis.
Fewer bots so far.
So far. Our theme music, as always, is from Blue Dot Sessions. Have a great week, and we'll see you all next week.
See ya.